Epictetus observed that most people are frightened by age, yet age is nothing more than proof that time kept its promise. What if the candles on your cake could double as runway lights guiding curiosity straight toward you? Tonight we break down 7 traits that mature men cultivate, qualities that pull women closer not in spite of your years but because of them. Watch to the end, hit like, subscribe, and drop your story in the comments so the next man on the timeline learns how seasoning becomes magnetism. Chapter 1. Experience. Experience is the dividend of every season you survived, compounded by the interest of honest reflection. You've tasted failure in bitter mouthfuls, chewed it slowly, and metabolized its nutrients into judgment younger men can only guess at. That history now lives in the relaxed set of your shoulders. No trendy rooftop bar intimidates you, no politics-laden dinner table unnerves you, no patch of silence terrifies you because you recognize silence as simply another dialect of connection. You speak less about what you might do and more about what you have done, filtering each story through self-awareness instead of ego inflation. Women register this immediately. They hear it in the way you order a meal without hedging your preferences, in how you recount a breakup without villainizing an ex, in the patience that colors your listening when her story wanders for a moment before arriving at its point. Stoic practice insists that truth tested by hardship acquires literal weight, and that weight anchors a room. Young bravado is an air horn demanding attention, seasoned reference points are a cello commanding respect. She leans in because she senses your opinions were purchased with difficult currency, years, missteps, reconciliations, so your advice can shorten her own learning curve. Your scars become braille she reads without words. That catalogue of lessons tempers knee-jerk judgment. Instead of labeling her anxieties as drama, you measure them against patterns you've already mapped, offer empathy, propose options, or simply hold silent space until she finishes sorting her own thoughts. This emotional breadth lowers her guard in ways catchy pickup routines never could. Your presence feels like a study hall for the heart, a place where tender confessions won't be hurried or mocked. Experience also fine-tunes your tempo. You know when to accelerate a fledgling romance with decisive plans and when to decelerate so genuine trust can congeal. You've learned that some answers ripen only in the slow cooker of time and that rushing is the sibling of regret. Decisions emerge from you like well-aged bourbon, warm, deliberate, impossible to fake. She tastes that steadiness when you negotiate a wrong hotel reservation without raising your voice, or when a flat tire on date night turns into an impromptu lesson on changing a spare beneath streetlight banter. Years on the boardroom floor or battlefield of entrepreneurship have also honed your resourcefulness. You don't just identify problems, you carry a ready-made toolkit of solutions. When her laptop crashes before a crucial presentation, you restore files from cloud backups and brew coffee while the progress bar inches forward. When travel plans unravel in a storm, you pivot to a local adventure rather than sulk amid cancellations. Reliability like the registers at a limbic level, here is a man whose presence narrows the margin between chaos and calm. Perhaps most attractive, experience has taught you self-amusement. You can laugh at your own outdated slang, dance poorly but enthusiastically, and shrug off being the only grey head in a salsa class because you understand embarrassment is just ego's smoke alarm. That self-deprecating ease signals to her that imperfection does not threaten your identity, which in turn frees her from the exhausting task of guarding her own. Knowledge of self, knowledge of failure, knowledge of nuance, these form the unspoken resume experience slides across every table you sit at. And unlike paper credentials, it never needs updating. Every sunrise adds another line. In a marketplace flooded with noise, your seasoned confidence becomes rare silence, a resonance that lingers after the conversation ends and follows her home like a familiar melody she can't quite place but longs to hear again. Chapter 2. Future Planning and Stability. A man seasoned by decades begins to view calendars the way a grandmaster studies a chessboard, not merely marking squares of time but forecasting lines of consequence. You no longer chase every shiny gig or speculative crypto rush because hard-won experience taught you that income without framework is windfall masquerading as fortune, loud on entry, silent on exit. An emergency fund exists not because a finance podcast scolded you, but because a brutal layoff once collided with a medical bill and forced you to pawn heirlooms. You vowed never again to surrender sovereignty to circumstance, so you built a moat, 6 months cash, lead insurance, crisp estate directives, seasonal budget reviews. To some, these habits scream dull domesticity, yet to women seeking a partner rather than a project they whisper something warm and primal, security. Stoic forethought regards fortune as fickle and therefore prepares. When she hears you discuss next year's tax loss harvesting strategy or explain why you laddered T-bills against interest rate swings, her limbic brain receives a signal older than the oldest lullaby. This man can provision, can endure drought, can steer through fog. Yet stability is not stagnation. You still chase moonshots, early equity in a clean energy startup, an Ironman at 50, a sabbatical to write a novel, but you bankroll boldness with disciplined savings and contingency grids. Risk lives in your portfolio, not in your rent money. You invite her into these visions, showing spreadsheets that balance daring with runway. She sees room for her own graduate program or gallery opening nested inside your timeline, not tacked on like an afterthought. Your calendar carries weight, a dinner penciled by you lands like marble, not chalk, because you defend commitments the way sailors defend bulkheads. The reliability of your yes fertilizes trust. Trust, in turn, is the soil where passion grows sustainable roots. She relaxes into long-range dreaming, kids, passports thick with stamps, a home infused with art, because she senses the scaffolding beneath the fantasy. Stability even influences your tone. You negotiate raises without desperation, gift generously without guilt, and navigate market dips with a shrug that says, I planned for winters. When turbulence hits, a parent's illness, a recession, a relocation, your first instinct isn't panic but protocol. That composure becomes erotic gravity. She isn't choosing between fire and foundation, she's getting both, stacked in rational harmony. In your measured orbit, her own ambitions feel less like risky departures and more like plotted trajectories. Together you aren't merely aging, you're compounding interest, wisdom, and desire, calibrated for the decades to come. Chapter 3. Non-reactivity. A wine glass shatters behind you in the restaurant, red splashes across tile, voices spike, the waiter freezes with panic widening his eyes. 2 tables over, a couple jerk upright, their conversation derailed by sudden noise. A younger man in your seat might whirl around, exclaim, toss a nervous laugh to prove he's unfazed, or worse, bark at the staff as if rage could rewind the spill. You simply soften your voice, make brief eye contact with the nearest server, raise an open hand in a silent all good, take your time, then return to the sentence you never finished. The message beneath the calm is undeniable. Externals don't hijack your internals. The Stoics called this an unshakable interior citadel, a fortress where judgment remains yours alone. Women test for non-reactivity constantly, usually without conscious intent. She arrives 10 minutes late and issues no apology, curious if your mood sours. She teases your vintage soul playlist, gauging whether you defend taste with brittle ego or shrug with amused confidence. She mentions a co-worker's clumsy flotation just to observe whether jealousy storms your posture. These aren't manipulations, they're evolutionary scans. Her nervous system hunts for clues. Can this man regulate himself when friction sparks? She watches micro-expressions, tightened jaw, darting eyes, flared nostrils, for blips of defensiveness. When none appear, attraction expands like lungs inhaling relief. You become safe terrain. Non-reactivity is not apathy, it's controlled response. You still feel surprise when glass shatters, irritation when traffic snarls, pangs of protectiveness when another man oversteps. But feeling rides in the passenger seat while principle steers. You grant emotion a voice, never the steering wheel. In conflict, you favor clarifying questions over accusations. You sound concerned about my workload. What specifically worries you? Curiosity diffuses blame, and she registers that in future storms, sick kids at 3 a.m., sudden job relocations, an aging parent's diagnosis, you'll choose thoughtful navigation rather than tirades. This predictability grants her nervous system permission to relax. A relaxed woman is more willing to risk vulnerability, creativity, even mischief. She laughs louder, dreams bigger, and explores intimacy deeper because she's no longer budgeting energy for damage control. Your stability becomes a kind of erotic gravity. The calmer you remain, the more freedom she feels to express complex emotion without fear of triggering meltdown. Non-reactivity also reframes mistakes as moments of leadership. Suppose the waiter brings the wrong entree. Instead of sighing theatrically or lecturing about service standards, you smile, request the correction politely, then segue into an anecdote about your own rookie errors bussing tables in college. She sees that you can assert needs without humiliation tactics. Respect blossoms in the space where dominance would have sprouted resentment. Consider the neuroscience. When a man flips from calm to anger, a woman's amygdala lights up, flooding her bloodstream with cortisol. Even if the anger is not aimed at her, the primitive brain wonders, how soon until it is? Non-reactivity, by contrast, keeps your own cortisol low, which mirrors safety back to her system. Mirror neuron sync. Trust deepens. Cultivating this trait requires daily rehearsal. You schedule cold showers to practice breath mastery under shock. You deadlift heavy not just for muscle but for composure, learning to grind through discomfort without facial theatrics. You meditate, watching thoughts rise and fall like birds across sky, detaching narrative from reflex. Over time, gaps widen between stimulus and response, inviting reason to stroll in. Stoic journals help too. Each night you review moments when reactivity flared and script improved responses, training your brain to preload calm for the next trigger. Importantly, non-reactivity isn't a mask of false zen. Repression leaks eventually. Its authenticity filtered through discipline. When boundaries must be enforced, you do so firmly, eyes steady, volume unchanged. She learns that your no arrives free of apology yet free of venom. That balance is rare and fiercely magnetic. This trait pays dividends outside romance. Investors trust you when markets convulse. Employees trust you when restructures loom. Friends call during crises because your presence lowers collective pulse. Yet nowhere is the payoff more intimate than in love. Picture her sharing a fear she's never voiced, perhaps insecurity about aging or guilt over past choices. She watches your face the whole time. If judgment flickers, the confession retracts. If calm empathy holds, walls crumble and connection leaps years ahead. Non-reactivity also immunizes you against external validation traps. When compliments arrive, you thank the giver yet remain unmoved in self-worth. When criticism surfaces, you mine it for data and discard the venom. She notices that opinion doesn't rule you, principle does. That independence increases allure precisely because it cannot be bartered, it can only be invited. In practice, imagine a crowded bar where someone bumps her drink, wetting her blouse. Adrenaline shoots through her, embarrassment, frustration. You hand the stranger a napkin with a nod, secure new drinks, crack a gentle joke about fashion innovation, and guide her toward the patio breeze. Scene reset in 60 seconds. She feels protected not by aggression but by composure that reorders chaos. Ultimately, non-reactivity is about sovereignty. A man at the mercy of external variables is a man outsourced. A sovereign man stewards his internal climate so thoroughly that weather changes outside cannot uproot inner seasons. Women attuned to longevity sense that sovereignty the way sailors sense true north. Align with it, and partnership ceases to be crisis management and becomes a voyage where storm clouds are plot points, not finales. So the next time glass shatters, flights delay, texts misfire, remember, virtue's signal strength rises against noise, not with it. Lower the volume of reaction, raise the clarity of intention, and you'll watch attraction grow in the quiet like dawn widening across calm water. Chapter 4. Gentlemanly Gestures. Culture may insist chivalry expired somewhere between streaming services and swipe culture, yet something ancient stirs every time you hold the door, walk curbside, or drape a jacket over her shoulders without her asking. These aren't grand, romantic declarations carved from fiction. They're small, subtle rituals that bypass the intellect and land directly in the body. They speak to neural pathways wired over millennia for protection, provision, and care. In a world that often confuses attention for intimacy, these micro-gestures remind her of something deeper, grounded, observational kindness that doesn't need applause. When an older man offers these gestures, they don't feel performative because they're not led in manipulation or mimicked from a dating coach's script. They're instinctual, embedded into his muscle memory by decades of repetition and the quiet wisdom of watching what makes others feel seen. You're not role-playing a romantic lead, you're offering ingrained courtesy. These habits don't announce themselves, they reveal themselves. She watches you open the car door without ceremony. She sees you slow your pace at crosswalks, so her stride doesn't have to hustle. She notices how you never eat before everyone is seated. These are not gestures for show, they're expressions of internal order. The Stoics called it eucrasia, the harmonious balance of parts, where courage meets restraint and strength serves kindness. Your gestures are not loud, but they are unforgettable. When you place her on the inside of the sidewalk without comment, she may not say anything aloud, but her nervous system registers, "I'm being considered." When you instinctively move between her and a chaotic crowd, she doesn't just see protection, she feels safety. That sensation roots attraction not just in admiration, but in deep trust. And it's not just how you treat her. She's clocking how you engage with the server who forgets your order, the overwhelmed barista at the counter, the child in line behind you. She listens to the tone you use with ride-share drivers, whether you hold the elevator for a stranger, how you respond when someone interrupts you. Each small moment contributes to a mosaic of reliability. Women may not mention these things directly, but they're paying attention. Gentlemanly gestures operate like subtext in a novel, always present, always influential, even when not explicitly acknowledged. The power of these gestures lies in their disproportionate return. They cost seconds but suggest lifetimes. When you take her coat and hang it with care, you're suggesting that you'd also carry her through difficult winters. When you reach across the table to refill her glass before your own, you're whispering, "My awareness extends beyond myself." These small acts are not about control, they're about thoughtfulness, about recognizing and honoring the person beside you without making it a production. Some might argue these behaviors are outdated or unnecessary. But their rarity is exactly what sharpens their edge. In an era where many men either fumble clumsily through artificial charm or abandon courtesy in favor of ironic detachment, true gentlemanliness becomes a superpower. It cuts through cultural noise. It quiets performance anxiety. It invites presence. The woman who receives this kind of treatment doesn't feel like she's part of a game. She feels like she's with a man who honors tradition not for nostalgia's sake, but because some behaviors are timeless precisely because they've always worked. These gestures also build polarity, an elegant tension that opens space for feminine softness to rise. When you open the door without hesitation, you're signaling leadership, not domination. You create the frame so she can paint within it. Your steadiness invites her fluidity. Your mindfulness invites her trust. And it's within that frame of shared dynamic respect that real intimacy deepens. Importantly, you're not doing these things to impress her. That's where most men miss the mark. You're doing them because they are you. The version of you that took decades to craft, one mindful act, one thoughtful word at a time. The version of you who knows that respect doesn't start at candlelit dinners, it starts at crosswalks and coat racks and quiet moments of noticing. The motions are old, but the message is evergreen. I notice, therefore I care. In a world that's louder, faster, and more distracted than ever, your gentlemanly presence speaks in a frequency many have forgotten how to hear, but no woman ever forgets how it feels. Stoic chivalry doesn't demand applause. It invites devotion. Chapter 5. Authenticity. Years have thinned the crowd of masks you once wore. Ambition shaved off the bravado mask that shouted credentials to strangers. Heartbreak peeled away the pleaser mask that agreed with every opinion in the room. Quiet hours alone removed the last mask of borrowed taste you kept just to fit set lists at parties. What remains is a man who can state his political stance without turning red, admit his spiritual doubts without drowning in them, and claim his affection for Coltrane over club beats without apology. Authenticity draws like gravity precisely because it liberates her from detective work. She doesn't have to decode double messages or brace for personality pivots. She knows the man who shows up Tuesday will resemble the man she kissed on Sunday, not a shapeshifter mimicking her mood to keep the peace. Your boundaries broadcast themselves the way a coastline broadcasts cliffs, visibly, firmly, yet framed by open sky. You don't answer work emails after 9 p.m. because you've lived enough dawns to realize no empire crumbles overnight. You need solitude on Saturdays, an hour with espresso and silence, to rinse mental debris and return generous. You enforce these lines with warm firmness, inviting her into your cadence rather than hiding it until resentment forces an ugly reveal. Predictability, once scorned as boring, becomes romantic currency. It signals she can lean into you without worrying the ground will tilt tomorrow. Authenticity tunes your compliments to a pitch she trusts. When you say she looks luminous in that olive sweater, she believes you because flattery isn't your default dialect. You don't compliment makeup you didn't notice or feign obsession with shows you've never watched. Your praise rings like a handmade bell, rare, resonant, undeniably real. She files your words with the weight of evidence, not the fluff of routine validation. Stoic ethics revolve around coherence between word and deed. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that hypocrisy shreds the soul from within. In practice, authenticity means no feigned interest in trends to appear youthful. You'd rather invite her to spin jazz vinyl than pretend to love the throb of a club that steals conversation. It means admitting when you're tired instead of forcing a late bar crawl so you seem endlessly energetic. It means revealing that you meditate not because it's fashionable but because anxiety once strangled your mornings and breathwork unlocked them. Each disclosure stitches credibility into the fabric of your presence. The courage to be unedited invites her to relax her own filters, accelerating intimacy like removing shoes before a dash across dew-cooled grass. She sees you decline a second drink because you promised yourself clarity before dawn training, and suddenly she feels permission to decline social pressure that traps her. She watches you navigate conflict with straightforward language. I feel overlooked when plans change last minute, and understands she can voice discomfort without triggering ego warfare. Authenticity becomes a two-way escalator. The more you live it, the more she rides it upward toward reciprocity, revealing layers she hid from men who played mirrors instead of being windows. This unvarnished posture doesn't require rigidity. You remain teachable, open to her favorite neo-soul artist, willing to sample sushi grades you can't pronounce. Authenticity is not stubbornness, it's transparency about what's core and what's experimental. You can say, I've never tried that, let's see, with genuine excitement because trying new things no longer threatens your identity, it enriches it. She thrills at the discovery process because she knows the explorer beside her is grounded enough to map new lands without losing the compass of self. Your authentic stance also curates your social circle. Drama magnets, envy merchants, and gossip traffickers fall away because they cannot hook a man who won't trade truth for approval. The remaining friendships become proof of concept, people who know your contradictions and still toast your growth. When she meets these friends, they echo the same version of you she experiences, reinforcing trust by collective consistency. Perhaps most powerfully, authenticity mitigates one of the deepest relationship killers, uncertainty about motive. When you express desire, she knows it isn't a tactic to secure ego points because she's seen you walk away from attention that didn't feel right. When you apologize, she trusts it because she's heard you own mistakes in other arenas without prompting. Your transparency creates a virtuous cycle where vulnerability meets acceptance, which breeds more vulnerability, spiraling toward intimacy that outpaces surface chemistry every time. The modern world sells endless templates for attraction: play this role, send this text, wear this brand, but authenticity remains the cheat code that renders templates obsolete. It is less flamboyant than a sports car, less viral than a perfectly curated feed, yet infinitely more durable. Time corrodes gimmicks, it polishes genuineness. Each year deepens the patina on your straightforward laugh, your frank self-assessment, your refusal to outsource opinion to algorithms. She senses that longevity in your essence and extrapolates: if his sense of self is this steady now, imagine the fortress we could build on such bedrock. So you keep the masks in a drawer labeled relics, pulling them out only to remind yourself how heavy they were. You move through rooms as one consistent signal, and you watch the way genuine energy acts like a lighthouse, steady beam, rotating slowly, attracting only those navigating by real horizons. And as she approaches that light, confident, she sees the whole structure rather than a flickering illusion. Desire merges with relief. In a landscape littered with mirages, an authentic man is the rare oasis where she can finally drink without tasting pretense. Chapter 6: Intellectual Depth. Curiosity often peaks with age, not youth, because the older mind finally absorbs what the younger mind could only parrot: that the universe is an ever-expanding syllabus and you will graduate the day you die still incomplete. After enough victories and humiliations, you discover the most thrilling sentence in any language is, "I don't know, let's find out." Dawn sees you reading Epictetus with coffee, marginalia sparking against the quiet. Noon finds you breaking for a documentary on coral microbiomes and jotting parallels to corporate ecosystems. Evening arrives and you tinker with Italian verb conjugations, not for resume polish but because pronouncing French-humeur feels like rolling marbles across the palate. By midnight you're outlining a weekend road trip around independent bookstores rather than breweries. None of this is performance, it is diet. Your mind, long starved on algorithmic junk, craves the nutrition of nuance. Intellectual depth is magnetic because it promises endless discovery and participation in a life that never plateaus. Each conversation becomes a corridor that opens into yet another library of thought. A woman rooted in her own ambitions, launching a startup, finishing a graduate thesis, mentoring interns, has little patience for partners who drain cerebral energy with shallow takes. When she sits across from you and hears a man comfortable quoting Seneca on tranquility and then pivoting to macro trends in renewable energy without breaking cadence, her synapses fire in gratitude. Dinner morphs into a salon, candles burn down while the waiter wipes empty tables, and you are still dissecting whether AI threatens or augments human creativity. Stoicism cherishes saphrosine, soundness of mind, a harmony between intellect and emotion. You nurture that harmony through constant learning. But knowledge paired with humility is what spikes desire. You reference Montaigne only long enough to invite her counterpoint. You cite a study on neuroplasticity, then pause, eager for her interpretation. Teaching without lecturing, debating without belittling, this is a conversational aphrodisiac. When she notices you pivot to her expertise with authentic fascination, asking how supply chain analytics actually work, how argon lasers reshape corneal tissue, how Baroque composers modulated tension, she feels seen on a cognitive wavelength that many ignore. Attraction blooms not because she's impressed by your archive, but because you employ it in service of connection. Intellectual depth also signals future vitality. A man who updates his mental software weekly is unlikely to fossilize into a crusty caricature. He will adapt when careers pivot, when children ask about quantum gravity, when crises demand rapid learning. She extrapolates. If he can master Mandarin idioms at 50, he can master diaper changing at 60, estate law at 70, virtual reality gardening at 80. Your mind's agility is a warranty on the adventures yet unimagined. Paradoxically, depth makes you playful. You sprinkle dates with spontaneous trivia, why Venetian glass sparkles, how crows recognize human faces, sparking her delight the way a magician produces silks. You gamify museum visits, whoever spots the earliest anachronism buys dessert. During traffic jams you improvise poetry cadences to the turn signal's metronome. Intellectual depth isn't a solemn weight, it is a toolkit for weaving novelty into mundane minutes. Humility remains the keel preventing swagger. You preface theories with current understanding because research may overturn them next month. You celebrate being proven wrong because it upgrades your model of reality. She watches you lose an argument with grace, eye gleam brighter, ego lean lighter, and something in her relaxes. Safe to disagree means safe to reveal, and revelation ignites intimacy. Depth also polishes empathy. Reading Dostoevsky trains you to map labyrinth emotions, studying anthropology inoculates you against ethnocentric sneers. So when she shares a childhood scar or an awkward office feud, you don't rush to solve, you reference analogous dynamics, ask calibration questions, help her locate meaning. She experiences support that is neither mansplaining nor vapid cheerleading. Ultimately, intellectual depth is desire's infrastructure. Looks spark curiosity, but it is depth that sustains pilgrimage. She knows that 5 dates in, you won't repeat jokes. 50 weeks in, your pillow talk will still detour through new constellations of thought. 5 decades in, breakfast debates will outlive brittle knees. Your library card, podcast queue, and curiosity journal become vows of ever-emergent fascination. In that promise lies a rare security, loving you will never equal boredom. Chapter 7, Health-Conscious Discipline. Nothing undermines the allure of maturity like surrendering the body to entropy. The older man who rose at dawn, tracks macros without obsession, and schedules annual blood panel sends a message deeper than aesthetics. He intends to stick around, vibrantly, usefully, fully alive. Health discipline isn't six-pack vanity, it is foresight carved into muscle and habit. You lift not to impress beachgoers but to preserve bone density so fractures never cancel future winters on the slopes. You stretch to keep joint capsules supple so you can drop to one knee for a grandchild's photo without wincing. You sprint hill repeats to arrest the freefall of VO max that saps adventure from late decades. She notices the byproducts more than the metrics, how you bound up 2 flights of stairs while younger colleagues take the elevator, how you dance through an entire wedding set without ducking out for water, how your attention stays razor-sharp on a Sunday road trip rather than fogging in afternoon lethargy. Stoic teaching frames the body as the vessel for virtue, courage, prudence, justice, temperance all falter if the vessel springs leaks, so neglect is less a cosmetic lapse than an insult to reason itself. Your plate betrays that philosophy long before you explain it. You savor wine but stop at the line between pleasure and impairment. You lean into protein and color-rich vegetables, reserving desserts for celebration, then setting the fork down after the 3rd mindful bite. You treat sleep like an asset protected by nighttime ritual, screens off, room chilled, thoughts emptied onto paper. Preventive medicine becomes a monthly appointment with accountability. You know your lipid panels as well as your stock performance because both fuel longevity. Supplements support gaps but never replace real food. Recovery walks balance heavy deadlift days. Sauna and cold plunges toggle stress pathways you once ignored. In this lifestyle, she foresees shared adventures unsabotaged by avoidable illness, hiking Machu Picchu instead of watching it on a documentary, snorkeling reefs instead of sitting poolside describing how you used to swim. She imagines years ahead where date night can still mean spontaneous salsa lessons rather than quiet resignation to couch fatigue. She pictures introducing you to her family confident that your handshake feels vital, your posture projects capability, your mood carries the buoyancy of a man who manages cortisol rather than letting cortisol manage him. Attraction fuses admiration with optimism. Life with you promises both wisdom and vitality, a rare pairing that lets her dream without the hidden claws of future caretaking. Health-conscious discipline also echoes in your emotional bandwidth. Balanced blood sugar and conditioned lungs create a stable neurochemical floor that tempers irritability, and she senses that calm long before she learns your gym schedule. When challenges surface, a red-eye flight, an ill parent, you remain composed because your nervous system is rehearsed in controlled stress. Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, rehearse hardship in controlled doses so real hardship feels familiar. Your kettlebell swings are not an end in themselves, they are philosophy expressed in biomechanics, proof you believe excellence must be embodied to be believable. Consequently, passion with you feels safe to burn hot, knowing the furnace is well maintained and ventilated. Nothing about this regimen screams monkish self-denial. It is joyous stewardship. You relish ribeye marble just right, but you source it from grass-fed ranches because you track inflammation markers. You savor craft beer flights on vacation yet return to hydrating like an athlete. You collect hobbies that borrow the body's faculties, surfing, rock climbing, paddle boarding, not expensive toys for midlife distraction but rituals that keep proprioception sharp. Through it all, you share knowledge without preaching, inviting her to morning mobility flows, packing picnic baskets that taste indulgent yet digest light, suggesting joint health screenings as couples experience rather than lectures. The cumulative outcome is simple and radical. You embody a future she can trust. In a world where many men let time dim their glow, you grow brighter against the backdrop of stereotypes. The silver at your temples becomes shorthand for stories, but the spring in your stride testifies those stories are ongoing chapters, not epilogues. Where others shrink their world to fit dwindling energy, you expand landscapes because your habits bank energy like compound interest. Thus physical discipline merges with romantic capital. She associates your touch with both present thrill and long-range security. In your arms she anticipates campfires at 70, backpack trips at 75, slow dancing at 80 under string lights neither of you intend to miss. Health-conscious discipline, therefore, is not merely attractive, it is the living bridge between wisdom earned and life yet to discover, and she crosses it toward you with wholehearted eagerness. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." The traits we explored tonight aren't tricks, they're mile markers on the road to seasoned excellence. Choose one, maybe steadier non-reactivity, maybe deeper intellectual curiosity, and start practicing before you sleep. Drop your commitment in the comments so the rest of us can hold you to it. Smash that like button if age just felt lighter on your shoulders, and hit subscribe for the next Stoic upgrade on living well and loving better. Remember, years alone don't make you magnetic, what you do with them does. Refine the craft of being an older man worth orbiting, and watch how effortlessly the right women, the right friends, and the right opportunities gather around your gravity. See you in the next episode, sharper and stronger than ever.